Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Felicia. Just in case you're new here, I create content around fashion, lifestyle, sewing and DIYs. So if you're interested in this kind of content, please do also click on that subscribe button, smash it to join the creative gang, okay? And to my returning subscribers, thank you so much for coming back to watch this tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how I went about recreating the sleeves on this style right here. I have already recreated the whole dress on the channel as well, although there was a bit of modification on the style, but I also recreated that same exact sleeve. I couldn't show all the processes in the vlog, and that is why I'm making this separate video, just to show you how I went about recreating the sleeves. I'm also going to be leaving the actual dress that I recreated on the screen for you to see how that went. And yeah, if you want to see how I went about recreating the sleeves, you definitely want to keep on watching. So guys, I'm just laying out my piece of fabric. I'm using a satin fabric for this tutorial. Feel free to use whatever fabric it is you're using to work on your dress. So the first thing I want to do is to mark my length of the piece of fabric I want to cut out, and I'm using 20 inches for the length and 15 inches for the width. Once I've cut this out, I'm going to iron down my interfacing. I'm using paper stay. I'm just going to iron it around to make sure that I stabilize my fabric. So feel free to use whatever kinds of stay you have at your disposal. Once I'm done ironing it, next thing I'm going to do is to just iron the hemming points. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to start creating my pleats and ironing it. I'm just doing this so that it's easier for me to know the points to sew along. So I'm just creating my pleats. So feel free to create as many pleats as you like, but if you want a whole lot of pleats, then you'd have to increase the length of your fabric. So here I'm done now. I've created about 6 pleats on this piece of fabric. I'm over my machine and I'm going to start running my stitches. So the first stitch I'm going to be running is the one for my hemming. So I'm just going to hold that in place. By the way, I'm using a different color of thread so that you can see clearly what I'm doing. I'm using a white thread right now to run through. Always use the same color of thread so that the thread doesn't stand out, by the way. So once I'm done with the hemming line, I'm just going to start running on my pleat. So in such a way that the lower fold of the pleat is cut on the sewing line as I'm doing so. I'm making sure that the folded pleat underneath this layer of fabric is held in securely along the stitch lines that I'm creating on the pleats. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, just to make sure that everything stays secured. The next thing I'm doing is just secure the edges with a stitch on both sides, and once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead to do the last stitch on the topmost layer. This last stitch I'm doing is the stitch I'm also going to follow when I'm doing the rest of this tutorial. So I'm just going to run that stitch, the same technique on the last layer, which is just right on top. And then once I'm done running this stitch, I'm going to go ahead to find the midpoint of the strip of fabric I have here. So I'm going to notch it right here. And once I've notched it, I'm going to be creating a kissing pleat to that point. So I'm just going to pleat in about 1 inch. In total, it's going to be 3 inches. So 1 inch on one side, 1 inch on the other side to create a kissing pleat. And then I'm going to run a stitch just to secure my pleat. Once I'm done with this stitch, I am going to fold my strip of fabric again. I'm going to fold this into 2 at the top right there, making sure that the folding is right at the point where my pleats kiss. So I'm just going to hold it right there, and then I'm going to run my stitch on the very first line of the very first stitch there, just so that I can conceal that first thread line showing. Also notice how the rest of my pleats doesn't have any thread showing on the right side, so all the thread is hidden underneath each layer of pleat. Next thing I'm going to do is just flip it over, and we are done with this for now. But I'm still going to go ahead to use a bigger piece of fabric to show you a bigger size of sleeve. So right here on my machine I have a fabric that measures length 25 inches and width 20 inches. So I'm going ahead to do this without putting the interface in, just to show you the structure, the kind of structure I'll have using a satin. Also note that if you're using a thicker fabric, you might not need to use an interfacing or an airstay underneath. So I just hemmed the lower part as I did with the first one, and I'm just going to start creating my pleats. So the first one is just like a hemming, a bigger hem. Then I go ahead and create my pleats as I sew along, making sure that I'm holding the pleats right underneath the other layers of my pleats. I don't know if this makes sense, but just make sure that your fabric, you're holding the pleats along with the lower layers. So I'm on my last stitch now, and I'm just running it at once right now. I didn't do the whole holding the edges of this one this time around because yeah, it still works. So I'm going to go ahead and iron this nice and flat and find the midpoint of my strip of fabric. Do the same thing, create the pleats 1 inch on both sides, 1 inch, which adds up to 3 inches in total. So this is my sleeve. I'm done with this at this point. The next thing I want to do is to iron down this pleated, the middle pleat on the sleeve. You might want to, depending on the look you're going for, you might want to do it without ironing it or iron it, depending on how sharp you want it to look. Anyway, the next thing I'm going to do is on the top of that bit where I just showed you now, I'm going to measure how wide I want my sleeve from the armhole. So I'm going to mark 4 inches right here, and I'm going to connect that 4 inches in a curve down to the edges as I'm doing right now. Just a curved line, not really a straight line, just to follow the natural curved line of the sleeve. So I'm going to run my stitch on that line that I just created, and once I'm done running the stitch, I'm going to cut off my excess, but leaving my ½ inch allowance that I'm going to be using to join the sleeve to the armhole. So here is the sleeve done, and this is what it's going to be looking like. For the smaller sleeve I did initially, I did the same thing, and this one, the width I used for the wideness of the sleeve top is 3 inches. So here's the bigger sleeve. This is what it's going to look like when attached to the rest of your bodice. And as you can see, because this fabric is a satin fabric and there's no hairstay or paper stay underneath, it doesn't have as much structure as the first one that I did, which I'll show you shortly. So this is a smaller one. As you can see, this one has paper stay in it, and you can see that it's standing better. It has a better structure than the bigger one, but still at the end of the day, it depends on the look you're going for. You might want to do with or without, and also depending on the kind of fabric you're using, feel free to play around with it. Okay. Alright guys, so that brings us to the end of the tutorial. If you have any questions or any requests for me to film, please do well to leave them in the comment section, and I'll be happy to go through them and come back with a video. But in the meantime, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, just to show that you liked it or you enjoyed it or you learned something from it. And I will get back to you guys in another video. Until then, Remain fabulous as always. Okay, bye.